yeah. Well, so whenever you're ready, man. Oh, do you want links?
No,
I
no,
guess.
I'll be good. I got
Yeah,
everything.
yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
You haven't seen anything I've seen, so it does make sense. Yeah, sure. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no worries. Um, Hello everyone, and welcome to the Pancake Parlay, episode 70. I am your host, as always, the Don, and I'm here with Chatters. How are you today?
I'm good, man. 70. That's a lot.
Yeah, I know we're like semi close to 100, but weeks go for quite a long time.
Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of crazy that we've been doing it like for so for so
Because
long,
that's the thing.
right?
Yeah, we I think I wanted to start this podcast just because I'm like, hey, let's talk about like Suicide Squad and stuff like that. And I'm like, man, these cool conversations that we have about stuff just disappears. And I'm like, we should just record that and just like, if we ever wanted to go back one day and just be like, what did I think about that movie at that time? I can just look back and be like, okay, that's what I thought about it, or like weird conversations about how because it always comes back to like Suicide Squad, wasn't it? Like, why would you send a girl with a baseball bat to kill an alien or whatever it is, like a supernatural force?
Hmm.
And that was a whole
Yeah,
thing.
I mean, it is weird. I mean, well, here's the thing. Like, I definitely know that I feel if I went back and listened to myself talk about said movies, I'll probably be a lot more critical of them at the time, but then I'll probably feel a little bit more nostalgic for them, like in the far future. Because like I'm gonna be doing a review of a movie, Spider-Man Far From Home, and I was kind of thinking, I did review the first movie here. And so it's like, I'm pretty sure I really liked it, but then I do remember I must have criticized it at some point, despite it being a pretty solid movie.
Mm.
So it is a good thing to kind of go back and watch our stuff. And yeah, obviously having you guys like listen is always a really really cool idea, kind of thing. But I guess we have some news to talk about first before we get into our
Yes,
reviews.
breaking news.
Yeah, Netflix revealed the first look of characters from The Witcher, which is really really interesting because I think a lot of people there was that initial picture by Henry Cavill a while ago. I think like when it was like first announced that okay, yeah, he's playing the role, and they had him wear like this really kind of like like a wig, like a white wig, and it looked really like
It was basically a makeup test or
yeah,
costume
in a
test. Yeah.
way, yeah, yeah. And it looked kind of weird on him, but now that we've got like a lot of other got this news that came out and a lot more photos, he looks a lot better. Um, as the Witcher. Like he's kind of like I think this is the thing about Henry Cavill. I think the big thing that Hollywood and a lot of these kind of the TV industry and stuff have, the big problem they have is a lot of actors don't necessarily look like from a physicality point, don't look like what certain characters look like in their original source material. So, like for example, it's kind of like Henry Cavill's kind of the best Superman because of how he looks, and it's very and because he acts really well as the character, especially as of Justice League in particular. Um, but it's very rare to have somebody who's like a good actor but then also like really ripped and like looks like fills in the role, like with him as Geralt, like he looks like Geralt.
Mm.
um
Yeah, no, yeah.
and
I think this photo, these photos do look a lot better. It
Mhm.
does look like the wig is actually part of his head and like looks like it's actually natural, which is really good.
Natural, yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
The rest of his outfit looks pretty good. You got the studs and everything. That's pretty much par for the course when it comes to Geralt's kind of look. I think what it really comes down to all this is what it looks like in motion. I feel like
Yeah.
because photos are really cool. But it all really depends on the camera that they're using and as well as how they frame things. Like basically, you could have these amazing costumes, but like film it with weird lighting that it turns into like a sitcom. Like I
Mhm.
very much believe in the camera and what they do. But photo shoot wise, Garrett looks really good. Yennefer, which is our lilac gooseberry lady, which is the brown haired she basically sorceress. She looks okay. In her photo she has like purple eyes, which I'm assuming is fake because purple eyes. But yeah, I'm very curious. She looks okay. She's got kind of the fur coat thing going on, which is good because that's kind of what the character has in the games. She usually is quite pale, but that aside, that's very different. I think my whole thing is what Ciri looks like. Ciri does not look like I know she doesn't, because the way Ciri is described, not only the books but as well as the games, you can see her. She very much looks like Geralt. She's really got that very pale white hair, and Ciri does not have that. She's just a blonde haired girl. So I'm very curious of what she look like. The rest of her outfit looks like, or her character.
She does look pretty boring in the picture that they kind of released. She's just like in the forest looking in the distance. I mean, they're all kind of looking in the distance. Like that's, I don't think that's something that's too much a thing to grab on. But it's like, yeah, it's like you don't really see the character, and they don't, because again, I'm not super familiar with the Witcher games. I played like a little bit of Witcher 2. Never completed it, but I should maybe get on it. But it's like, I'm kind of worried that they're doing a Netflix adaptation, for for The Witcher, right? Like, because it is a bit of a meme that a lot of shows that do have like the backing of Netflix seem to do a really poor adaptation of the source materials that they're based on. I think again, Geralt looks good, Henry Cavill looks good, and I think part of the reason I think Cavill's going to do a really good job in this. He kind of has to, given that he has to kind of prove himself.
Well, not only that, but he's like the lead. Like it seems like he's the only guy who's a known name who's actually known actor in this show. Everyone else is a known name, so it's very much of like to see if their ability to act. But very much Henry Cavill seems to be the main star in this, like obviously, but like he seems to basically be like, hopefully these the people who he's acting beside also give a really good performance, and kind of so he can bounce back and have good performance with them as well.
Yeah, well, I hope there is a lot of monster slaying.
Yeah, I think that's the one thing that we're missing, is that we haven't seen any concept art or anything about the monsters, which is, I think, a really big point of contention for the Witcher series, because after all, like, witches are made to be monster slayers. So, I really want that type of concept going on, or something like that.
So I was gonna say, so what do you think about the lack of a goatee? On it, because I kind of like the kind of beard on The Witcher. It gives a lot of character to him. But one of the reasons why he might not have it is because in another thing that you can kind of see in this picture, he only has one sword. Whereas like in the kind of Witcher games and stuff like that, he's usually seen with two. So I guess there's a lot of kind of rumors about whether this is like done for story reasons, like maybe it's like a very younger Geralt starting off in his journey in the world. Well, what's your thoughts in regards to that? Like, do you think there's any legitimacy in kind of rumors in that regards?
Yeah, I think so. I think the two sword thing is going to be something that's going to be the kind of the trope where it's you start off in one particular time and it's like it's them starting up, and then the thing that they're iconic for, they get it like halfway through or right at the end of the first season, and now we're at like Witcher base 1. Obviously, like Geralt never really had a goatee until I think the Witcher 3 games, and I think
really? Okay.
And I think that I think majority of people are just like, like if you look back at Witcher 2 or even Witcher 1 things, it's like, yeah, he didn't have the facial hair, and I think I remember people being like, oh, he's got facial hair now, he kind of looks like a granddad, but like I feel like that's kind of stuck. That's the iconic look of Geralt. That's what most people I think of, which is fine. Yeah. But yeah, like maybe one day, because I think Henry Cavill looks pretty good with a beard, I'd say.
I think he'd look. The thing is, he's a very beautiful man, right? So I feel like to kind of, because they don't make him look like he's grizzled or like roughed up. So maybe like after he gets a few scars over his eyes or something, like they'll make him look a little bit more battle hardened.
Yeah, that's what that
Whereas he
actually
kind of
that's what
looks
he's
like
missing actually as well. Is his I think it's one big scar on one of his eyes that goes downwards,
hmm
so he's missing
hmm
that. So I feel like that might be an also point of contention that will
something that
happen in the
happens.
series.
Yeah, because I feel like that's something. I think that's probably the reason I kind of like there was something missing with his face. He just kind of looks like he just kind of got off like a runway, like and not and not that he's been training all his life to fight monsters. Because you'd think even when you're training to fight monsters, you'd get like a face scar here and there, so a few close calls or something. But yeah, I guess we'll just have to see. Where it goes and where it is. Like again, I'm always interested, right? But Netflix doesn't usually inspire a lot of confidence when it
They never
comes
do
to
anything accurate. I'd say screen accurate, like like you'd say
yeah,
kind of like
like
Death Note. Like Ryuk looked pretty good with Death Note, but I
yeah,
think that's a
that's
you know
about
that
but that's
yeah,
about it.
yeah. Like what else did they?
Um,
What else? Because that's the thing. Because like they have the upcoming Cowboy Bebop movie, and I'm just like, oh man, I guarantee
is it
you,
a movie or is it a TV
TV
series?
series, but still, I guarantee you, then like I know it's anime and it's gonna be very hard to actually adapt, but I'm like, man, I doubt they're gonna have like that type of design work like well in live action, or like maybe they'll try to attempt it, at least try to, but who knows?
hmm Yeah, like look, I think the issue is like I think Cowboy Bebop is very much a like loved property because a lot of people who kind of grew up watching anime or kind of had their first kind of exposure to anime outside of something like a Dragon Ball Z or a Pokemon, right? Like I think those are two things that like a lot of non-anime watchers watch or have watched growing up. Whereas like something like Bebop, like kind of introduced a lot of things to people that were like, oh hey, like maybe the genre has a lot of like interesting chops. So I think like it's quite held very in very high regard to the people who enjoy it. And yeah, like when you do something like a bad uh version of it, people will kind of hold you up to the fire. And yeah, like look, Death Note, like I kind of lost interest in it after like hearing some of like the really. I know you liked it, Don,
I
but
think it's a different interpretation. If you don't know, if
yeah,
it's very different.
yeah, I guess yeah, in that regard. But I guess like there are some other things that like Netflix does like a pretty good adaptation of. Like what comes to mind is like Violet Evergarden because that's technically an anime, right? So it's like Netflix funding like an anime studio to make it. But like maybe like that when it comes to their live action stuff, it's just like no thanks. But speaking of adaptations that are actually good, um, I'm going to give a bit of just like a small spoiler-free review for now for Spider-Man: Far From Home. Don hasn't seen it at this stage, but we'll give a very very big in-depth review next week in regards to it. Just because I think it is a very very good film. It's definitely something that I think is the right direction for Marvel to go in for their kind of grounded, Spider-Man, like, well, I guess Earth-based movies, right?
Hmm.
Um, yeah, it's honestly like a really good film, especially after Homecoming, because I was a really big fan of Homecoming, especially because they do, the Spider-Man origin really well, while also not making it seem like a rehash of every other Spider-Man origin film. Oh yeah, like Uncle Ben dies and all this kind of
Pizza
stuff. Like it
time.
definitely does seem like this they skip out like on these things to kind of keep it fresh, and I kind of like that. Also, it has like one of the better villains in the Marvel universe, which I thought was really cool. We also have Jake Gyllenhaal playing Quentin Beck, who is a superpowered individual who gets it's kind of cute because like they kind of go because the whole movie is about Spider-Man and his team, well not his team, his like class, going traveling to Europe, for a science trip, and I think they're in Italy, and they see the news about how like um a mysterious man saved everybody from one of these elemental creatures that are suddenly popping up all over the earth. The thing that's really funny is like because I think in Italian, and maybe you can confirm that for me, Don, is that Mysterio is what's used for mysterious or mystery.
Yeah,
And
basically,
so
I think that's the really cool thing about Italian language is like it's basically like you put a vowel at the end of something. It's like, oh, that's the word.
hey,
That's how easy it
it's
is.
basically it is pretty cool. Like is that's how you can kind of talk, so they'll kind of get the gist of what you're talking about,
He's
right? And because
mysterious. Yeah.
and then like because on the TV he refers to that they refer to him as Mysterio when Spider-Man actually goes to see Quentin Beck. He says, "Oh, you're Mysterio." I mean, and he corrects himself because it's like, okay, that's not actually his name. But then like Quentin Beck like rolls with it. It's like, yeah, I'm Mysterio. Like it's kind of cool. And there's a lot of plot related reasons as to why that's the case. But I think it's very the one thing that okay for people who don't know much about Mysterio, he is a Spider-Man villain who is essentially somebody who's like a bit of an illusionist. So because going into this film, I knew that Quentin Beck was the bad guy. I knew that like there was going to be a point in time that there's going to be a change.
There's gonna be a betrayal of sorts.
Yeah, but the thing that I'm actually really impressed about the promotion for this film is that they don't kind of give that particular thing away. They don't give away the fact that even a little bit that like there is there's going to be a supervillain shift in Jake Gyllenhaal. Like they don't spoil any of that kind of stuff in the
Well,
trailers, and they have it
who is the
purely.
main villain? If you don't think about it, like, is it just the elementals? Basically trying to get them in control.
It's the elementals are a point of contention in the story itself.
Mm.
But then there's also the Mysterio character. Like I don't want to spoil too much because like just how big his role or the elementals role in regards to it. But like basically like they kind of play the role because they essentially like these elementals pop up. There's like a one that like hit like a desert. It's like a wind elemental. There was one that was a fire elemental that kind of comes up. Like there's all these ones that are popping up all over the place. And because everyone major has kind of gone off or disappeared or
Isn't
in
this
something
around the
happening.
Thanos snap? Like,
Yeah, you know what they call it the I forget what exactly they call it. I think they call it the blip. Like in universe they refer to it as the blip, which essentially is when everybody just disappeared and then came back 5 years later. So it's really funny. There's a scene where like a bunch of students are filming like the marching band at the high school, and then all of a sudden like the marching band disappears, like or like half the marching band disappears, but then like 5 years later when the marching band is there, the original marching band comes back, like they pop back into reality.
mm.
And hit the other people who are standing there. So it's really funny to see that like yeah they do address aspects of how there's a bit of a time skip, but I think obviously it's going to be something that's mostly ignored for the most part, if that makes sense. Like okay, yeah, 5 years later, but like okay, like like I think in universe, like the thing that I often say that is a bit of a problem with Marvel movies is that when something happens in universe there doesn't seem to be a lot of consequences, like there isn't like a status quo change. This isn't the case for Far From Home because I think they do an excellent job at showing the effects of like the Infinity War and subsequent kind of reestablishing of the status quo at the end of Endgame when everybody comes back. It's really there's this one really great joke where they kind of as I mentioned they're going on this field trip, and one of the teachers says, my wife pretended that she disappeared during the blip, and she ran away with her fitness instructor. Um, so I kind of found that
Hmm.
really funny. Would be something that, I guess certain people would try to do. They try to pretend that they died, and he mentioned, oh, like we had like a funeral and everything. Like, and yeah, like it's really funny to see that they do establish a lot of stuff within the universe that's happened. But it's not the main focus. It's like it's just something that plays a story beat. Like for example, because a lot of the characters went there. There was like this. I think there's this Asian guy. I think he's called. I think it's called Brad. And essentially his character was like this small little like Asian kid. Not very like good looking or anything, but because everybody comes back 5 years later, he's 5 years older and he's like ripped and shredded and attractive, and all the girls like him. And so he becomes like a bit of a rival for Peter during this trip,
Mm.
which I kind of found funny because I think what essentially happens is, in order to make it easier for the people who came back after the snap or after the blip, everybody went back to their original classes, if that makes sense. So even if, like, 5 years later, if you were in like if you were in grade 10, but then 5 years later you were in you were in uni or whatever, you'd go back to whatever grade 10,
Mm.
just so it makes it easier for the people who came back, which I thought was like a pretty interesting way to kind of deal with it. But yeah, like a lot of the kind of cinematics for this is really awesome. There's definitely like the heavy looming of Tony Stark's death. Tony Stark dying in this film has kind of taken over the Uncle Ben role for Spider-Man,
Yeah, I
in
feel
my
I feel like
opinion.
people. Yeah, I think people have seen that where I think because I remember reading a post where people were complaining about I think this version of Peter Parker where you might not like the actor or how he acts, but I think what people had was Peter Parker was supposed to be the everyday superhero, and I think that's what also
Mhm.
Stanley wrote him. It's like he's more relatable than anyone else because he's kind of like a teenager. He has all these thoughts. He never does certain things, or he's always nervous and things like that. And I feel like
Mhm.
there are people out there where they didn't like it as much because normal people don't get mentored by a millionaire billionaire type of guy and gets like a special
Mhm.
suit. Like he
Yeah.
did create his own suit, but I feel like that whole home aspect of Spider-Man is completely changed. Where basically he was mentored by a millionaire to I don't know. He's kind of semi been the replacement for Iron Man almost, and I feel like that's where people have kind of put that where they've kind of seen that maybe in the next, because I think they said that the kid who plays him, he signed on for like at least like three more movies at least, or like however long they want to keep him for. So he could be very much the new guard of the Avengers as well.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the direction that they are going to be trying to take Peter Parker going forward, because in the comics, like they like in originally he was much older, like they kind of had him like kind of go to like university, and he was kind of like smart, and that's why he was able to kind of make this, although he is smart in this, like in like back then they kind of have it as, oh, he's like you know creating his own chemicals, like in his own like room and stuff, whereas like in this world, like he has like Tony Stark's kind of backing to kind of make his own suits or make this or that. And we have like Happy returning back as kind of being like his kind of help. Like that's the thing, in very much that way, how like Happy Hogan, it was like Tony Stark's kind of like friend, and like kind of like a little bit of like an Alfred like character. He like plays that kind of role for Peter as well. And there's like obviously an ongoing running joke about how Happy is like seeing Aunt May. I do like the whole thing about Aunt May not like being a lot younger, because it makes a lot more sense, at least to me, that like your aunt isn't like a 70-year-old woman when you're in your like high school age. Definitely makes more sense to have her like in a like mid to late 30s 40s.
Mm.
But yeah, it works out really well. But yeah, there's like it becomes like a really really interesting film especially after the big change, like after it's revealed that Quentin Beck is a bit of a bad guy. It does kind of change it a lot. And the film shifts quite a lot, but it's really awesome, like how everything kind of works, and also like as I mentioned, like the choreography, all the fighting, all the action is really great. But on top of that, a lot of the scenery is really great because you're going to like multiple locations around Europe, Prague, Paris. Actually, do they end up going to Paris? Oh no, I don't think they actually do. Although
You're
often
telling
talked
me they
about.
don't climb the Eiffel Tower? Come on, guys.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a lot of organic story reasons why that's the case. Venice, there's a lot of really awesome locales and scenery that it makes me want to go to Europe, even more so.
This is like one big advert movie just for to get to Europe.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I think and some of the big stuff, the big stuff is happens during the mid credits and the end credits. There's two end credit scenes, the mid credit scene and the end credit scene. Stick around and watch both of them because they're very important, both for Spider-Man going forward and I guess the Marvel universe going forward. But I won't talk about him during this. I'll wait for you done to catch up, and we'll have a big discussion about what's going forward with Marvel Universe. But yeah, that's basically my review for Spider-Man. Go watch it; it's really good. I think Marvel movies that are good need to be supported, and these are one of them.
Yeah, instead of just being average stuff.
Yeah,
But
rather
yeah.
than being average fluff.
But tell me about something else that you've been watching that I personally thought that was going to be pretty average, especially when it comes to TV. Tell me a little bit more about this.
Yeah, well, the other thing that I've been watching is Jessica Jones season 3. And yeah, I was really surprised. I was like, I downloaded it, and and I wasn't too sure whether or not I was gonna enjoy it, right? Because with a lot of the kind of Netflix TV shows, I kind of feel that you know it can be kind of disappointing, right? Like especially with the last couple of seasons with the show. I haven't even seen Punisher yet.
Season 2, but you
Um,
skipped right to Jessica Jones.
yeah,
Do
because
you
I
have a
thought
do you feel like she's a better character, or like what's the deal?
I think they do a better job at um expressing her character in this show, and then also having her go against a villain that is good for a character who's like super strong. And usually a character like that is super intelligent. And that's kind of the case um, with this particular season. Now, to kind of give a bit of a recap of what happens after the events of season 2, we kind of find that Jessica Jones finds a little bit more about like how she got her powers. We find out that there's her mom. She tries to look for her mom. This is the kind of issue with season 2, in my opinion. A lot of it was like running around trying to find her mother. Oh, letting her mother go. Oh yeah, she's a murderer. Blah blah blah. Like it was just a really boring kind of story. Whereas this season, it's kind of also dealing with a lot of other things, such as Jessica Jones's best friend Patty Walker, also developing powers. Now, the one thing that I'm kind of a little bit disappointed in this regard is so Patty Walker, she is a character in uh in the comics, right? Trish Walker, Patricia,
Mm-hmm.
now she's known as Hellcat in the comics. But now I'm not a big uh Marvel comic buff, not well, outside of maybe like some of the main people like that everybody knows, right? But like looking into a little bit of her biography, like she doesn't seem to be somebody who had like super strength or anything like that. At least according to like I just put up the wiki on Patsy Walker, aka Hellcat, and it says that she's a well-trained martial artist and gymnast. She has psychic senses,
Mm-hmm.
force field generation, wrist-mounted retractable claws and grappling hooks.
So
Now, in the actual show, they make her out to be like she doesn't get the full treatment that Jessica got, because obviously Jessica had interrupted her therapy, I think, at the end of season 2. So she's not as strong as Jessica, but she's got like the ability to, like, for example, like they kind of have like some of the initial episodes centered around her where, oh, she's trying to like she basically has like her own kind of Rocky styled episode where, she's kind of training to be better as like as a superhero kind of
is
thing.
she
Like,
the main
she's like,
villain of this
no, she
season?
isn't the main villain. She is not the main
Because
villain.
I thought
In fact,
because I thought the whole point of this story was going to be like, her friend gets powers, gets jealous, they fight. Which there has to be a fight, right?
yeah, there is there's a fight, but it ends really like it's like no fight.
Mm-hmm.
Well, actually, there's 2 fights technically. But it's like it's kind of like a no fight kind of thing by comparison, just because like Jessica Jones is just like ridiculously strong. Um, the thing that kind of happens is Trish kind of goes off on her own to try and be a superhero and be a vigilante. And Jessica and her like cases cross over. That's essentially what happened. And that's how they kind of reconnect and they become friends again, in a sense, because they decide, oh, let's work together. And even Jessica kind of understands that, okay, like she can't do this on her own. The one really cool thing that happens is Jessica kind of meets a guy who actually has like a really unique superpower where he can basically tell if somebody is a bad person, because he starts to develop like a really, really harsh headache. And the more bad the person is, the more harder the migraine or the headache that he has on him, to the point that like he'll like when somebody is really bad, he'll start like bleeding out of his eyes and stuff like that, because that's the kind of pain that he's suffering by being in their presence. And the thing is, like, what basically happens is he basically comes to Jessica for help, because, well, kind of inadvertently, because he had, um, because he's kind of a bit of a swindler, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where he kind of, when he needs money, he owed
Well, oh,
this
wait. Is this the guy from the previous seasons? The other? No, wait. No, sorry. I was thinking about
no,
Daredevil.
not Malcolm, not Malcolm.
Right, right.
Not Malcolm. Although Malcolm is in this, he's working for his new thing at the end of last season is that he was working for Jerry Hogarth, who's like the big lawyer. Which, by the way, again, they had her play like a front and center role. Her role last season was horrible because again they tried to make you sympathetic for her because she was suffering from ALS, right? Which obviously is a very debilitating disease. But she's a complete cunt
Mm.
throughout season 2. Like she manipulates people. She like gets a woman to like kill her partner just to make sure he doesn't spill the beans on some of the shady activities she got into. Like, of course, this is a kind of thing, but they try to give her a bit of a redemption. Like, oh yeah, like she's a good person, like in the end, kind of thing. And it's just like, fuck off, man. And it was kind of the same thing this season. Like with Jerry, like, oh, a little bit. She kind of has her own season where it's like, oh, she kind of tries to rekindle um with an old flame that she had back in high school. But her old girlfriend is married to someone. Um and so Jerry kind of uses Malcolm to try and find dirt on him, and it eventually kind of leads to him committing suicide. And it's kind of like, oh shit, like Jerry didn't mean this, and especially because he blames her for it, and like people start, it kind of becomes like a bit of a thing that kind of makes her situation tumble, and also leads to her kind of crossing with like Jessica Jones as well. But due to certain events.
Mm.
Now, the thing is, as I was mentioning, the man who has the ability, I forget his name, but like he essentially he's got the ability to sense whether people are good or bad. Um, he Eric is his name. Now Eric, what he basically owed a lot of people money, And what he did in order to try and get this money is he finds people like who gives him a headache, and then slips like a letter to them saying, "I know what you did. Um, if you want to keep your secret safe, you know, drop off like $10,000, at this location or whatever."
Mm-hmm.
But because he does that, it leads to an event where someone follows him, um, and Jessica Jones opens the door, and this person stabs Jessica right in the chest. And it leads to her. She manages to survive, but it leads to her having a lot of. I think she loses her spleen or something like that, which is it's an important organ for your immune system and whatnot. And yeah, essentially, like it becomes a bit of, so she kind of gets caught up because she realizes, oh, this guy wasn't actually going after Jessica, it was going after Eric. So the investigation becomes of, okay, who are the people that he blackmailed? Let's find them. Let's see if they're the people who stabbed Jessica, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really interesting because, again, like, I think they mentioned before, like, Jessica has a lot of issues not knowing what's good or bad sometimes. And so Eric literally having the ability to tell you whether someone's good or bad, like, she feels very justified every time she kind of does something. Like, one of the first people that they find is a pedophile. So like, they kind of call the cops and, like, lock him in there so they can kind of arrest him and stuff. But eventually they kind of find who the person was who stabbed her. And he's basically like one of like his background definitely sounds very comic bookish. Like he's like really smart. He's got like 5 PhDs. And
So
he's a serial
realistic.
killer. Yeah, but he's a serial killer. So a la Dexter, right? And yeah, and I think he ends up, and because he's like he's basically a psychopath. He like he kind of manipulates his emotions to kind of make himself seem more of a victim than he really is. But then, like, when he actually talks to, like, there's a scene where he's like Jessica's in his apartment, and he's like, oh well, I'm just gonna call the cops on you. Like, what are you gonna do? You don't have any evidence that, like, I stabbed you, kind of thing. And it's really great because he calls the cops and he puts on this voice where he's like sounds like a victim, and then like immediately closes, and you can just see like his persona completely changed. So he's definitely a much more interesting villain because, again, he's a lawyer. He's got a background in law. So he knows his rights. He knows how to kind of gauge the system, especially given that there isn't any evidence of the stuff that Jessica is accusing him of. And because he knows what Jessica looks like, it kind of leads to Jessica relying on and asking Trish for help to try and take this guy down. And it all kind of escalates from there. I think it's a good season, and it does. I think it definitely falls a little short in some regards, but I think it's much better than season 2 of Jessica Jones. It seems like season 2 does seem to falter for a lot of the Netflix series. But yeah, I think it is a really excellent season of the show, and I'm very glad that I decided to stick with it, especially given things that they brought up with throughout the show. It is a bit of a shame that, once again, that Netflix is kind of ending things
Mm-hmm.
in the show, with like Netflix, and that Netflix Marvel relationship is kind of wrapping up, but it does end on a much better note than season 2. So I would personally recommend, if you enjoyed Jessica Jones season 1 and you want to see her actually doing more investigating. I kind of feel like season 2, like, yeah, there was investigating, but it didn't have like the ground level kind of investigating that like season 1 kind of did. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, no,
But yeah,
it makes sense. Like, yeah, it didn't have that the Snoop type of feel to it that, yeah, definitely the first season had, like, where
yeah,
it's
it
just
didn't have
getting
the
a story.
noir tone, yeah, as much as this season does. Yeah, so it's kind of a thing, like, a guy walks into my door, instead it's like a woman walks into my door, it's kind of thing. It's like, instead it's like for Jessica, it's like a guy walks into her door.
Mm.
You know, it's a good season, and I'd recommend it because I don't think you'd be wasting your time, watching the shows. But yeah, that's my review for Jessica Jones season 3. What about you? What have you been watching, bro?
Yeah, I've watched something that has been hyped up for quite a long time for me because I'm a big fan of this director.
Okay.
And it's Nicholas Winding Refn, and he has a show on Amazon right now called Too Old to Die Young. This is 13
Oh,
hours
okay.
long, 13 hours long, and it's a 10 episode show. So there is a lot of content in these episodes. It's basically one big movie. Um,
Okay.
and it's really hard to explain what the movie is because I think I remember listening to a I think interview with the director, and he's just like, yeah, all my pieces of art or like my movies and things like that, you can't describe in a sentence format. The only thing you can
Hmm.
possibly do that is Drive, because it's very I guess it's a lot more simpler, and that's the most approachable movie he's kind of ever done. And
Hmm.
this is kind of his first foray into TV shows. So the easiest way to kind of explain it is basically Too Old to Die Young is about a cop called Martin. He
Hmm.
experiences the death of his another cop, his friend, right in front of his face, and basically he was a corrupt cop, and basically kind of takes his place and kind of goes more and more into the darker side of police life and being a corrupt cop, and kind of doing vigilante justice, kind of by this company that says, hey, it's kind of like Wanted almost, where it's kind of like, hey, we know this person's like a pedophile, or hey, we know these people are, selling so much drugs, so you should go and kill them. So he kind of does underground type of violence, and then he kind of goes into the underworld of yakuzas and things like that. Actually, the thumbnail that I put in this video is Hideo Kojima is an actor in this movie. He's a kind of like
Oh,
he's like a yakuza,
okay.
because I think
Okay.
he's a really big fan of Drive,
Hmm.
and I guess Nicholas Winding Refn as well, and I guess they must have crossed paths, and then they're just like, hey, you want to be in my TV
Be in
show?
my film, yeah, yeah, yeah. A
Which,
TV show rather, yeah.
yeah, so I feel like that's pretty cool, and I feel like I really do enjoy the show. It's got his his type of style where there's shots that linger on for about 2 minutes. There's no dialogue going on. It's more about absorbing the scene and where you are in the environment. He does have a very neon tone. A lot of his films, even his most recent film was called The Neon Demon. So he really likes
Hmm.
keeping the neon color palette as well as colors like of light blue, red. That's kind of his kind of, I guess, style. Like in particular, because like someone like Tarantino, he has a particular style. Refn, he
Hmm.
has a very Refn is kind of like Tarantino, but very art house, less about the dialogue, but more about the scenery. I feel like that's the easiest way to kind of describe his kind of style. Um, Really great performances from each individual cast member in this. You got Jenna Malone, who I haven't seen in a very long time in anything really. She really plays a really good kind of like a head boss mafia type person. Miles Teller is the main character. He is Martin. He does a really good. He does really good as well. I always liked Miles Teller in his
Hmm.
in his roles, and he really he does put his all in, especially as a conflicted type of cop. There's one scene in one of the episodes where he's not quite sure if the person he's supposed to be killing is actually a bad person. Like, who are these people that they're telling me to kill? Are they actually
Hmm.
bad people? So that's a point of contention, as well as there's some really cool, interesting stuff in this show. Like the two other main cast in this, their names are Jesus and Yuritsa, and they're both from Mexico. So that's the kind of the cartel side of the underground. And they also have a big part of the show. They do a really good job of humanizing them, as well as them giving them characters, because they're basically married to each other. And Yeah, there's even I think episode 2. It's just an episode all in Spanish. So this show is very much it's very different. I really enjoy the show, and people who might like shows like this could be very much interested in it. I wouldn't say, like, I would suggest the show to people. However, there is a caveat of, there is a particular style of this show, and you might not like it because it's not really straightforward. It's very lingering. Shots take some time to go through, or Refen's more about silence in a way, where there's the music tells the story as well as the scenery. So there's going to be shots where people don't talk, or if they do talk, they take very long time to respond. So they do have that. So yeah, I really do enjoy the show and how it phrases itself. It kind of reminds me of like David Lynch and how he does things. David Lynch is also known for things like Twin Peaks mostly, but he did like Eraserhead, Elephant Man. So he has a very weird style to him where it's more about the scenery or the narrative isn't straightforward. And this show does this show does have it, where this show Too Old to Die Young, it has some hidden some context. I think of something about kind of like demons and doing people's fulfillments and like the Witch King or something like that. So it's very, but it's very like open to interpretation. It never obviously tells you, but it's very like, it feels like it's in a different world. It's kind of in a fantasy world because normal people do not act this way. So I personally, I would suggest people go watch it, or at least watch one of Refen's films and know what you're into, because this is very much a big investment, I'd say, especially for first-time viewers of Refen. So I'd say go watch Drive and then go watch his other stuff, because every film that he has, there's some sort of weird hidden context in all his all these pieces of media that he makes, but it is very it's not on the nose. It's very much you have to explore it yourself. So I really enjoyed my time with it, and I'm really enjoying that at least like Amazon gave very much an artist to give him a mainstream TV show. But yeah, it's definitely not for everyone, but I would suggest if you're into that type of style of, it's kind of lowbrow but very highbrow at the same time. Like it's got extreme gore and violence, but at the same time it does question humanity and things like that. So I'd say go give it a watch if you would be interested in something like that, because I know it's very much not for everyone. That's my caveat. But yeah, I really enjoyed my time with Too Old to Die Young.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, it does sound a very interesting film. Like, I like you mentioned, like Drive is definitely a very, like, I guess the mainstream kind of thing that like people know about. And yeah, like, I guess, would you say like if you enjoy Drive to watch this film or to give it a chance?
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, as mentioned before, Drive is, I think, the caveat to the rule, because because like even I knew this guy just because of Drive, and I think everyone that's how he got his mainstream success, was because of that movie, because it's a little bit more accessible. It had Ryan Gosling in it. It had bigger actors in it, and it had more of a straightforward storyline. And I think if you watch the next movie that he made, Too Old to Only God Forgives, that is very much it's very symbolistic of, I guess, motherhood and being brought up, as well as being like a god, I think. And then the next movie after that is I think an Amazon movie that came out. It's called The Neon Demon, and that's about what is it? What do you call it? Supermodels, and kind of doing photo shoots, and what it kind of what it means to be a, I guess, person in the media. Like, how far are you willing to go to keep your youth? So there's a lot of weird imagery and a lot of disturbing stuff in a lot of his stuff. But I think Too Old to Die Young is second most accessible to Drive. So it's like you watch Drive and then probably watch Too Old to Die Young, because I think like something like The Neon Demon, that is very much an art house type of film, and I know for a fact some people are just like, what the hell did I just watch?
So yeah, it's something a little bit more easier to consume, to kind of as a gateway movie into some of his more eccentric work.
Yeah, basically. But yeah, I'd highly suggest it. So that's it for Too Old to Die Young. I also want to move on to Black Mirror. So I'm a big fan of Black Mirror, and they had their what do you call it? Their season 5. Season 5 Black Mirror.
Season 5 or season 6. Like, it's kind of weird because they released
Bandersnatch. Yeah, they released that movie Bandersnatch. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was only that movie, right? Like, so it's like it kind of made it weird, like, because last year, I guess they didn't have a season per se, but yeah. So now, or was that earlier this year? Man, I don't know.
It was like December. I think I remember during Christmas time. It was
okay.
it was around there, and I think I remember the memes.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah,
I was gonna say Bandersnatch season 5, Black Mirror season 5. What are your thoughts for it?
uh,
Because it definitely seems like a really really interesting show, but they only had 3 episodes this season.
yes. But that's the thing. That's actually normal place because
Yeah,
I
the first season was
first two
pretty
seasons
small.
are
First
three
two seasons.
basically 3 episodes because most people don't know this, but it's actually originally a UK show, so it's done by the
Mhm.
BBC and everything. I think the main guy is Charlie Booker. I think that's his name. So that's the conceit of his show is kind of nihilistic in a sense of like what technology can do and how we can be careful. Like and basically that was kind of the whole conceit of the show and how technology changes our lives.
Mhm.
And it's mostly always in a negative way. A lot of, when you watch Black Mirror, you know you're not going to have a happy ending. It's always going to be a little bit more dour and a little bit more sinister. And I think things have changed. Because if you look at
Okay.
if you look at the reviews on Black Mirror, this
Mhm.
recent season, they're not been received as stellar as some of the previous episodes have.
Oh, is it significantly like as in maybe I don't know last season or the season before we're getting like 8 out of 10s or 9 out of 10s? Are they getting like a 6 or a 5?
I feel
Like
like the previous season, season 4, was more like a mixed bag. So then you had some
Mhm.
pretty good episodes, which were just kind of like 8.5s, pretty good
Mhm.
concepts and things like that. But then, like before that, season 1, 2, and 3 were pretty much solid episodes all around. But I feel like season 5, the most recent season, is kind of where I think things kind of changed. And I think one of the main reasons, as I mentioned before, is that things feel a lot more Hollywood, in a way where it's not as kind of defeatist in how it frames everything. I feel like there's like a sense of hope in a lot of these stories now, which I
Oh,
feel like
okay.
the hardcore community of Black Mirror does not like that. Because I feel like everyone's kind of getting their happy ending almost, or people are getting their point across. Which in the previous seasons it was very dour. Like if someone wanted to do something, basically they'd just get cut off, or it'd be very negative in a sense. It wouldn't end
Mhm.
the way you wanted to end it to. But this season, I'll start with the first episode, which is Striking Vipers, which has Anthony Mackie, Falcon from the Marvel movies. So he meets up with his old friend, and basically it's just like, hey, I found it. It's basically this VR game, a VR fighting game that they play,
Okay.
and what happens is, basically it's like kind of like it's very much Street Fighter. I'm pretty sure it parodies Street Fighter pretty much to the T of like the characters and everything, and
Mhm.
these two close friends, they're in VR and they're playing the games together, but they basically start having sex in the game, like as their avatars. Um,
Oh, okay. That well, I totally didn't expect that, but continue.
yeah.
Yeah.
So basically, they start doing that, and then it's kind of a are we gay, are we not gay? As well as Anthony Mackie's character is married, to his wife, so there's a lot of like
Wait, wait,
tension.
wait, wait, wait. If he has sex with a guy, he does at least become bi, right?
That's what they answer in the thing, because it's not only that, but it's just more like, but we had sex in the game. It's not me.
Oh, right, because I had sex in the
The
game.
VR game, yes, yes. So it's not really like we're having
Yeah, no,
sex,
no, no.
but
I
like
totally, I totally, I totally missed that connection. Okay, okay. I can see why.
so it's
Yeah,
so
there's
it's like, hey, if
the
I play one character,
questionable.
another person plays Chun Li, I'm like, yeah, I'm having sex with Chun Li, but like, if you're a guy
Yeah, but it's
behind
like,
it, I am I gay? I don't know. Like,
I
so
see.
it's
Seems
so
the question.
yeah. So that's basically the tension of that episode. I thought it was pretty interesting. How they phrased it. I don't think it's really as taboo as if this came out 5 years ago, this would be probably a lot more taboo and a lot more, I guess, of a thing. But I feel like I think we moved a little bit more forward these days. That it almost feels like, okay, yeah, all right, whatever. Like, but
Yeah,
it is very interesting.
it's like the writers only just discovered deviant art and they're like, oh wow, this is a weird thing, and it's like, yeah, no, it's not as weird as some of the other the other shit on the internet.
Yeah, but
Yeah, I guess that okay. So there's an episode with Miley Cyrus. I know that. Is that the Is that the next one?
That's the last one, but I can still talk about that one.
Oh, okay.
That's Rachel.
Yeah.
That one's called Rachel, Jack, and Ashley too. So this one
Okay.
is, I think like this one is poignant, but I'm not quite sure why people hate it so much. I think it is because it does have a really good Hollywood happy ending, and I feel like this one feels most Hollywood out of all of them. So what basically happens is Miley Cyrus's character, who is basically playing herself, pretty much like a pop star, media relation type of person. She's doing her own thing. She's selling all these records, and basically these record producers are kind of keeping her in this particular happy phase and making her write music that she doesn't want to write or produce. Like, she wants to do something a little bit more different, a little bit more edgy, something that's off her brand. Kind of what Miley Cyrus did, like, from Disney to like where she basically like came out and like after Disney stuff, and basically that whole type of thing. It's basically that story, but what if the record producers kind of like screwed you over and basically became paralyzed, but your brain still functions.
Okay.
So it's kind of like basically questioning, like what is copyright, or making music without kind of consent almost, or if you sign a contract, what is your mind like? Does it control your mind after you've kind of been like paralyzed or in a coma, basically? So, and then also with that, it's because they also marketed these dolls called Ashley 2, which is just kind of this little mini robot that kind of talks and kind of interacts with you. And they have a whole thing where this one girl's really obsessed with, Ashley, and buys one of these Ashley 2 dolls, kind of gets attached to it because she doesn't really have much friends in school. Her mum died when she was really young. So there's a lot of kind of attachment to there, and then there's the sister who's a lot more, closed up. So it's a lot more family matters, kind of story, as well as kind of, basically the sisters working together to help Ashley, because basically they pull out the plug of the Ashley 2 doll, and basically has sentient consciousness from her brain, inside the Ashley 2 doll. So the Ashley 2 doll is like, hey, like, basically help me out, to kind of like help me out with me being paralyzed and things like that. So that story, I feel like is it's okay. I really do like the structure, but as I mentioned before, very Hollywood. Yeah, but it does feel like if this was not attached to Black Mirror, I feel like it would get a lot more favorable reviews. However, I think there are certain people who this is what Black Mirror is all about, and this is really different style of Black Mirror. Like, as I mentioned before, the first episode of this season, we have characters having sex. Basically, sex is never really shown in Black Mirror, or if it is, it's very disturbing. I feel like this one is like the first time where it's kind of shown in a particular way of like, these people are enjoying themselves having sex. So I feel like it's very...
but are they having sex?
Oh,
it's all online.
Exactly. But yeah.
Yeah. I think I get what you're saying. Like, yeah, in a typical way, like, because of maybe it kind of feels like, when you say it feels more Hollywood, do you mean like it feels a lot more like they're dumbing it down?
Yes, that's basically what I mean. Because it's like, as I mentioned before, the previous seasons were, some things got like loose ends do not get tied up sometimes, or you never get that happy ending most of the time. You would always get the defeatist thing. So that's why when you do watch Black Mirror, you do have to be in a particular mindset almost, because that like the happy eye, the good guys aren't going to win type of thing. Like, stuff is always going to go wrong, or something's really effed up about the world when we're living in this particular type of way. And yeah,
when we live in a society.
Yeah, basically. But yeah, the second episode's kind of about a guy who takes one person hostage, basically a company, let's just say they're Google, they're more or less Google, takes one of the employees for hostage and wants to talk to the CEO about something. So that's kind of the mystery. It's got mystery about that, but it is very much kind of like it's really cool about the mystery. But once the mystery is revealed, it's kind of like, yeah, whatever. But yeah, I feel like this season's kind of like, it's a little bit more misses than hits. I feel, as mentioned before, I feel like there's a little bit more backlash in these episodes because they do not have I don't know, they don't have the down message, I suppose. And I feel like if we're going to trace it all the way back to where all this changed, it very much was season 3. And like season 3 is good, and even season 4, parts of season 4 are pretty good as well. I feel like there's only one particular episode to blame that changed Black Mirror forever, and that's the highest rated one because I think it had the most mainstream appeal, and it's the episode San Junipero. And I think like from that episode on, Black Mirror turned into something that like people wanted it to be something that it really wasn't, and I think it's turned in that particular way. Because San Junipero is about basically it's set at any time you want, and these people set that they want to be kind of in this 80s nightclub type of setting, so they're stuck in the 80s and they have 80s hair and they have 80s music, and they basically, these two girls kind of fall in love with each other, but the kind of, I guess, twist in the end, like it's not really a twist at the end, but it's more kind of revealed like 20 minutes in, is that this world is virtual. You get to choose which kind of world you want to be a part of. And so it's kind of this whole thing of like, one of the girls is like, hey, you're really interesting, let's meet up in real life. The other girl's like, no, let's not meet up in real life. But that one and its particular ending is a lot more bittersweet, more than any of the other episodes. Pretty much every single episode always ends in really depressing. So
yeah, I mean, like you know, Black Mirror is on my list of things to watch. But I like, there was like an odd episode that I watched. I think maybe it was from season 2, or something, where it was essentially about like the guy who can rewind his memory. And that particular episode, like people were talking about how like, oh, it's really messed up and blah blah blah. And I'm like, oh well, I gotta watch it now. And I watch it, I'm like, man, that was pretty messed up. And like, yeah, like the ending technically has like like, oh, it could go either way because you don't know whether or not the guy survives or not. But I think, like, in my mind, like, at least from the evidence in the show, it kind of implies that he does not. Especially it sucks because he ended up being right about everything that he was paranoid about. Highly recommend. I forget what the episode name is.
Yeah, I think season 1, episode 3, the entire history of you.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, really, really great episode. But yeah, like you know, it's kind of funny because, you know, a lot of Black Mirror is supposed to be like, you know, a commentary on technology, and even like, you know, kind of corporations as well, like, you know, kind of corporations taking over a facet of you, or being so reliant on technology owned by like a third party. It is kind of funny that, you know, there could be some Hollywood executive meddling that makes you feel like, oh, don't worry about you know, giving yourself to like transhumanism, it'll be fine. You know, don't worry about it. It kind of does seem like a very, you know, I say it all the time now, cyberpunk future. You know, like this dystopian future where, you know, they want you to kind of be okay with giving your soul away to, you know, certain tech, and being reliant on, you know, numbers in order to do things. I obviously, like, you know, Black Mirror is supposed to be, you know, I think the thing is supposed to be like a critical look at technology, not necessarily something that's predictive. It's supposed to kind of make you question what you're doing in current society.
Yeah, absolutely. Because yeah, it could swing kind of either way. Like one of the episodes,
way,
yeah, because one of the, it just depends on how much freedom you give things and how far things can go. Like what the first episode done by the Netflix kind of like a type of, when it came back, it's called Nosedive, and that's kind of like a social credit system where, you know, if you are mean to someone or weren't happy enough to someone, or you did some bad action, like you don't pay your rent on time, you get this lower score, and then you get excommunicated from society almost if you get a lower and lower score, which is pretty much parallel to what China's doing at the current moment
right now. Yes, that's correct.
So I feel, and I feel like, you know, that's very poignant almost, and it's like that's what's happening in China. Very much could happen here, you know. So there's a lot of, I feel like, yeah, there's a lot of cool episodes and a lot of interesting things that Black Mirror has, and I feel like, yeah, it's kind of more of a heed of a warning almost, or like, if technology like this did exist, how would it play out, almost like in, I guess, in the bad timeline of things. But, you know, like this current season, I feel like was less more about that, and I think it was more just like, we're going to tell stories about technology in the world, but not show the consequences of that bad technology almost. And, you know, because like, yeah, the first episode's kind of more about like, you know, what are relationships in the modern day when you got VR and things like that, when it's very realistic. The second episode's more about, you know, what happens when we're distracted with social media in our lives. And I think the third episode is kind of more like who owns yourself, like who owns your copyright. Like if you're a musician, who owns your image, who are you actually? And you know, if you do die or you're in a coma, who are like do people have the right to control you? I feel like that.
Yeah, much like it kind of reminds me of you know how they recently had you know they do a lot of like 3D uh, animated versions of like realistic versions of like actors who've passed away, like for example Carrie Fisher in Star Wars. They've had her likeness
Mhm.
kind of potentially used or very much used for episode 9. You know, so it might be the case that yeah, that might be something going forward where you know you sign a contract and you're James Bond for the rest of your life. You know, not necessarily that's a bad thing if you if you get the royalties, that's all that matters. You know, maybe your estate will you know negotiate pay. And I mean like I'm sure like you know it kind of reminds me of like a little bit of like what Stan Lee was doing. That dude like worked till he died. You know,
Basically, yeah.
and part of that was you know driven by like you know making sure that there was enough for the people that he's leaving behind once he left. So I can definitely see the temptation. At least it's not necessarily the case for this particular
Yeah,
episode because
that
you know.
episode is very much forcing people. It's kind of like because like they do reveal that it's like, hey, you know, this person doesn't have to be alive anymore. We can have a live hologram of a performance, kind of like I think what they did in Coachella like a few years ago with Tupac.
Hologram Tupac,
Yeah,
yeah.
they basically did that. They basically kind of shilling that idea of like, hey, this person doesn't need to exist anymore because like if their brain is still alive or something like that, we can churn out music and have their copyright of like their voice. We don't need them anymore once we get a certain amount of information. So I feel like it's like who controls you as a person. You know, especially these days when like something like deep fakes is becoming more and more
Well,
relevant.
yeah, I was about to say like in a world of like deep fakes and being able to like mimic people's voices and stuff. Like I don't know if you've heard you know Joe Rogan. He's a very big influential podcaster. And you know there was a university that did a really good job at emulating his voice. And made him talk about monkeys and how he was gonna make his own like kind of team of chimpanzees in a hockey team or something. It's quite hilarious, but it was all done by AI learning and AI like you know AI based on things that he said. And the more data you have on people talking, the more realistic they'll sound. And then on top of that, with deepfake technology, being able to replicate people's like faces and putting them on you know heads and stuff like that. You know, funnily enough, that plays a role in Spiderman Far From Home. So keep a watch out for that as well. It's all very much related, and it's very modern in terms of
Mm.
you know the things that we're dealing with and what the future holds.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
that's really cool.
But yeah, they're
I guess
definitely with Black Mirror, if you're jumping in, you can really jump in really at any episode. It is an anthology series, so you can jump in at any time. But I do suggest watching first episode, first season. I feel like there's a main reason why I think that one's probably the hardest one to stomach because it's not really so much about technology, but it's very off-putting. And I feel like
yeah.
if you can survive that, you can kind of survive the rest of the episodes. My
Hmm.
personal one that always gets to me is the second episode of the first season, where everyone
Hmm.
is basically forced to watch advertisements, and kind of how you're
Uh,
trapped in this
oh
world
yeah.
and you try to help people, but in the end, helping people doesn't really help in the end. So there's a lot of stuff like that in the show. So it's very defeatist. But definitely, I feel like this season's kind of been it's kind of lost its kind of way. As I mentioned before, it's a little bit more Hollywood, a little bit more happy endings. It would be okay if it was not rebranded, as Black Mirror. But
Hmm.
yeah, it just depends on what you want from the episodes. I still think it's probably better than the most recent Twilight Zone. So this is probably our best modern
Have you
equivalent.
have you been have you been watching any of the Twilight Zone? Like
I watched 2 episodes and I'm like, yeah, I don't know, the writing's just not there. So
not there?
yeah,
Like because isn't it is it Key who's writing the who was writing the
yeah,
show? I'm pretty
Peel
sure it
thing, yeah,
was. Oh, Peel is
yeah,
Peel is right.
yeah. So
But yeah, not. not Jordan Peele, not like not good, not good. Because initially I was like, ooh, maybe I'll check it out, but like I haven't.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well,
I
let's say
haven't
I
gotten
watched
around
two
to
episodes. I
it.
know one of my friends watched the whole series, and he's just like, yeah, this is just it's not good writing. Like the metaphors are not like smart. They're very like, I'm gonna hit you in the head with this metaphor, and like it's very
Mhm.
obvious like from the get go what this is all about. Like, so it's kind of dumbed down, which I feel like
Yeah.
there needs to be less
I mean,
dumbing down.
I kind of like I've watched some old episodes of uh the
Twilight Zone.
Twilight Zone, and like the black and white one, and I really liked some of them. Like some of them, you don't kind of expect the twist that kind of the Shyamalan ding dong twist at the end. Like it's pretty good. So it is kind of disappointing that like with all the tech and all the kind of advancement we've had in writing that can't kind of capture that same kind of thing. And it is kind of just kind of stealing the name,
Mm.
so to speak, so we can kind of peddle kind of watered distilled versions of trickery to people.
Yeah. But yeah, that's
Um,
basically Black Mirror. So I feel like yeah, just definitely go give it a watch if you want to be depressed for a while. Um, but yeah, tell me about what you've been watching as well. I think you've got one more thing to talk about.
yeah. Well, the last this week was Shaft 2019. It's a if you don't know anything, Shaft is basically it's got a few movies actually. I totally didn't know it had as many movies as it did, but it's essentially like an action comedy, black exploitation. If you guys have ever heard the term, like essentially usually like films that are centered around black characters and black culture and stuff like that. The original movies came out, I want to say, like in the 70s.
It'd
And
be around the like late '60s, early '70s, because I think that's when black exploitation kind of skyrocketed. Because there was like
skyrocketed.
Blackula, like the movies like what is it, Black Dynamite was parodying those types of movies. They were
Those
just
kind of films,
yeah.
yeah. Yeah, well, that's one thing. If you like Black Dynamite, and if you haven't watched it, please watch it because it's a great film. But if you like Black Dynamite, you will like this film. Black Dynamite is very much like the setting is set in like a 70s, 80s like period, or at least it kind of feels like it is the case. Whereas Shaft 2019 definitely does feel more like a modern film. And the thing that's really good about it is because I watched the old Shaft, like Shaft 2000, which had the main character being played by Samuel L. Jackson. Samuel L. Jackson getting two film reviews today. He's actually pretty good in Far From Home as well, although he doesn't play like a super big role in. But yeah, like I remember watching Shaft 2000 when I was like much younger. I was like, ooh, I shouldn't be watching this film kind of thing. But
That was the same with me with Terminator 2. And I remember
it was
that
also
they always put it at 9:30, so I can never watch the end because it's like way too late.
uh,
I'm like, God damn it, man! Just give me at 8:30 like it usually is.
yeah, I mean that's kind of like me. That was like me and Matrix. I watched the Matrix. I think literally in 2000 as well. Like and I like pretended I was asleep so I could watch it. But Shaft 2000 was very much like a from memory it was more of like an action film more than like a comedy. But that could also just be like my kind of recollection of the film. It was much more like of a serious film, and Samuel L. Jackson, he's a man of many talents, kind of like put on different hats, because he's been working in the industry, but he still is Samuel L. Jackson, if that makes sense. Like when he acts, and he comes back in the role as Shaft 2. So the second iteration of Shaft, who's kind of mentoring his son JJ, aka Shaft the third. Um, and it's kind of cool because it's like a modern iteration of what the characters are like you know, Samuel L. Jackson's character, he becomes like a private investigator. Like he used to work for the police, but then quits to become like a private investigator, and that's like where his character is now from when we saw him last in the 2000 film. Whereas his son is a FBI agent, but like he's a bit of a nerd, so he like always like refers to himself as like, oh, I'm not an FBI agent, I'm like a data analyst, and like, that kind of like puts off a lot of like girls, like, they're like ask, oh, you work for the FBI, you're an FBI agent, and he's like, oh no, I'm a huge nerd, like, kind of thing, and they just kind of go away. So the thing about this film is it's not politically correct in any aspect. It definitely is very much the classic kind of black exploitation film, like a lot of violence, a lot of sex, like at least like depictions, not necessarily depictions of, but references to all these kind of concepts, and it doesn't shy away from like a lot of the jokes that it portrayed. Like I saw that this film, before I watched it, it got like it was like a 30 on Rotten Tomatoes. It was crazy. I was like, no way, it could be that bad. Oh, actually, I could actually believe that it could be that bad. That's not
There's always
necessarily
a
true.
possibility.
Yeah. There's always a possibility. Like, it's kind of that thing. There was a time when, they were doing adaptations. Like, it would be like a film that came out maybe in the 90s or like late 80s, and it was the third version of it came out then, and then they decided to do a fourth version. For example, Die Hard, right? Die Hard 1, 2, 3, and then like maybe like a decade later they came up with Die Hard 4, and Die Hard 4 was actually really dope, from memory.
Yeah,
I don't know if it was
Die Hard 4 was pretty good. I think it's like, yeah, Die Hard 5 was just like, oh man,
bad.
that was just so
Yeah,
bad. Please stop.
yes. And and I think that's the thing that these kind of films kind of do a bit of a mistake on sometimes, when they do kind of have like, oh, like, it was the same thing, like, how they had like Rocky Balboa, right? Because they had like the previous Rocky films, and then there was like a big gap, and then they came out with Rocky Balboa, right? If I'm not mistaken. And yeah, it's like sometimes it's really good when you give like a bit of time, because they can kind of like come up with a really cool, unique way to introduce things. But the thing, and it's the same with this. So essentially, there's like, it's very much a very classic um uh plot where JJ, his one of his friends dies from an overdose, and it kind of, he thinks that it was actually a murder, and so he asks his dad to like help him and find out like who actually killed him, and is it related to do with a big drug dealer who Samuel L. Jackson's character had to deal with back back in the day, that led to him and his wife essentially becoming estranged and divorced, and because he's like an estranged father, but it's not by choice, but because he comes back into his son's life, it's very much like he doesn't care. Like, he's just like, oh yeah, you're you're acting too much, like you're not really acting like a man enough, and all that kind of stuff. So it does definitely it doesn't shy away from like kind of talking like how people
Mm.
did, like maybe like a decade
But
ago.
that's the thing.
But I don't
At
think
least it keeps it's actually pretty genuine. Like it sounds like a
yeah,
movie that was kind
yeah,
of made like that, and it captures the tone correctly.
yeah, it's not, it's unapologetic of what it is, but I think it's a really, really good film. And yeah, like it also has Richard Roundtree, yes, that's his name, as the original John Shaft, come back, who I think is in the show, in the movie he's a retired private investigator. So yeah, so the thing is, it's very cool to have like all three generations in one movie. Like I believe Richard Roundtree was also in the 2001, but he plays like a smaller role, whereas in this he does actually play like a significantly a bigger role than he did before. And like I find it really cool when they kind of go out of their way to kind of do stuff like that, because it really kind of brings back like that there is like a canonity, and the writing is kind of all there. Like the guy's like 76, and he comes back, and he's an absolute badass in this film as well. Yeah, so I think like the plot is pretty straightforward. It hits all these numbers, but it does like a great job at executing it. So if you enjoy black exploitation films, if you enjoy the movie Black Dynamite, if you just enjoy like action films, and maybe one that it kind of feels like it kind of takes comes in and fills the vacuum that's kind of left by like these high budget Hollywood production action films. 'Cause I don't think this movie is particularly super high budget. I think 35 million. But
which is pretty damn low. Rest of it, like,
yeah.
yeah.
But it's really good, and I highly recommend it. Especially since I think, like, according to the its Wikipedia page for its box office, it only made 19 million. But I think it is doing a lot well on the streaming service.
Mm.
And so I think that's where it's probably kind of winning a lot of good vibes. Because yeah, it released in June 14th, and then the Netflix international market got it 14 days later. So
Yeah, which makes sense because honestly, like this type of movie, 100% is probably not for like majority of the international audience is probably not going to watch it. Like, or like go out to cinemas. So it's like I can kind of see it. So instead of doing the whole marketing push of we're gonna get posters, we're gonna advertise it to get on the theater and then put them on theaters, it's probably a lot more cheaper to be like, hey, Netflix, buy this movie for so and so money, and then you can just have it. So yeah, it makes sense. Because yeah, we're definitely not the target demographic. It's very much an American movie.
Yeah, American-centric film, but it's a really, really good film. So I would recommend, like just purely as like here's the complete. And the thing is, I think at one stage, like, so he like mocks his son because like he's like, oh, like what do you like? Do you live in a high-rise apartment with like a metrosexual like roommate who wears like who drinks like coffee, and like he's basically kind of like mocking millennials, right? So I think like it's kind of funny because maybe like some of the people who work at Rotten Tomatoes, maybe they are millennials and they got offended by this film.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I looked up, I did the due diligence and looked up the reviews, and yeah, a lot of the negative reviews seem to be like it's targeting me or I can't believe this. But the surprising part is it's 32% for critics, but 94% for audience. So it's very much like the niche that they're trying to hit. The people who are really excited about Shaft, the people who like the character Shaft and probably know about the character, love this movie. So it's like it's exactly the movie that they wanted. It's like, for example, when I was reviewing Too Old to Die Young, it's like this show is very much for fans of Nicholas Winning Refn people, and it's basically exactly what you want from him. But when it has mainstream broad appeal, the TV show does not. So I feel like I feel very much like what Shaft is like. The people who it's trying to target and what their main demographic is, they just love this. Like, this is the movie that they wanted.
Yeah, I mean that's a general thing that I kind of slowly evolved to kind of understand with Rotten Tomatoes. It's like if you like a genre or if you like a series, like you should definitely go off the audience score versus the review score, the kind of critic score. But if you don't know much about the film or you're not necessarily interested in it, then you should go off the critic score, because I think critics do sometimes get it correct. Like, I'm not saying that they don't. Like, I mean looking at some of the reviews already, like, Toy Story 4 is apparently an amazing film. And it's getting like similar kind of audience review and critic review. It's got 98% from critics. That's like I don't know if that's one of the highest scores for like a film, isn't it?
Yeah, basically. I think basically Toy Story is like the most perfect like set of movies. Basically, like everyone loves Toy. Like, I think in Rotten Tomatoes, like Toy Story 1 and 2 is like 100%, and like Toy Story 3 is like 98. So it's like,
I think is it Alien 2 is also one that has 100%. There's only a few movies that have like quote unquote 100%.
Yeah, but that's the thing. I think it's like the numbers are a lot more skewed, obviously, when it's like older movies, because like obviously like Rotten Tomatoes only really came into prominence in 2006, but like really gained mainstream attraction like 2008 or 9. Like, so it's like there's been a lot of movies where people just didn't log their reviews up until most recently, and I feel like a lot of people do use that. I usually, I look at multiple sites and see kind of the general average. You look at your IMDb, your Rotten Tomatoes, your Metacritic, and I think kind of form your calculation from there, I suppose.
Yeah. I think obviously having, like you said, like having an informed opinion is usually the best way to go. And yeah, like Rotten Tomato does give like that bit of an edge, but yeah, just to kind of circle it back, yeah, watch Shaft if you enjoy the genre, you enjoy action films, or you like Black Dynamite or Samuel L. Jackson. All of these things will make you a fan of this film, guaranteed.
Absolutely, absolutely. But yeah, that will be us for this week. Remember, you can always listen to us on Spotify, iTunes, and we live stream this on YouTube in our channel, Marketing Movies. And you can also listen to us on Libsyn, which is our website. So until next time, Henry Cavill might not be our Superman, but he is probably a Geralt for hopefully the near future. So until next time, see you guys.